Hi, I'm Tony,
And I'm Patrick.
and we want to welcome you to today's version of Cave to the Cross Apologetics. And we are continuing our discussion of Mitch Stokes' book, How to Be an Atheist, right? And by the way, if you're enjoying these things, it would be really helpful if you would subscribe, share with your friends, and press the like button so that we know that you're liking what we're putting together.
Right.
We're working our way now through the science portion of this book. If you'll recall, this book is split up into two sections, science and morality. And we ended last time working our way through the 6 chapters. Real science is hard, right? And he talked to us about the nature of theory, how theory works, the distinction between theory and a hypothesis. A theory is an explanation, and there are various explanations to all of our observations, and so it makes it really difficult to do science because it's hard work. Since there are many observations, there are multiple ways that things can be explained, and so it becomes hard work for science to do. We ended last time with the idea that inference to the best explanation is kind of the work that the science is doing, right? So you make a hypothesis or a theory, you come up with something like that, and then you, which is just an inference to the best explanation, right? It allows us to come up with a good explanation. The next section, and that we want to look at, is the question then that he's going to ask us: how do you know what is best? Right? So we're trying to come up with the best explanation. All right, well, how do you know which one is the best explanation?
Asking all the hard questions.
Yeah.
There.
So one of his analogies that he's using throughout this chapter is the Copernicus and the Ptolemaic debate, right? How Aristotle explained the structure of our solar system versus how Copernicus, right, explain the structure of our solar system. Copernicus said, hey, the sun is the center. Aristotle had explained, no, the earth is the center, right? So he's using that as a way to help us to explain. So those are two theories about how our solar system works and how we can explain the movement of the sun, or seemingly movement of the sun, or the idea that the sun is here at one time and then over here at another. There are two competing explanations, two theories about how we can come up with that. And so now the next question is, how do we determine what is the best theory, right?
And so we looked and said that Hume's fork, which is it's either just the facts, and so we called those sense perceptions. And those were the things that you observed with any of your 5 senses, or that they were relations to ideas, which are things like the laws of logic, mathematics, definitions that have to be true because of what they are, such as a circle has no corners, or 2 + 2 = 4. So those are the 2 ways that we are able to come up with knowledge.
Right. Yeah. The logical positivists then later in the 20th or the beginning of the 20th century then, building on Hume and capturing his Hume idea, said that, well, so what really allows us to have knowledge is what they called if it can be verified by our sense experience, right? Verifiability, the verification principle. Or if it's true by definition, right? So mathematical statements are true by definitions, whereas facts that are in the world that we can verify are true by our observations, our sense experience, right? So they basically took Hume's fork and modified it slightly for their purposes,
a little bit.
Right? Yeah.
And so when we see with the nature of our solar system, everyone had the same observations. Everyone had the same laws of logic and mathematics at the time. So how do we determine which one's the best explanation? So we realize that sense experience alone, he says, is often not enough to determine the best explanation in many cases. It's different if you say there's no such thing as the sun comes up, you're wrong. Okay. So how do we know what is best? And so in this case, best is conditioned by what you already believe about the world and the way that it works. And the same holds for any inference to the best explanation. Your idea of what constitutes a good scientific theory will also depend on your beliefs about the physical world, what it's like, which has been shaped by a lifetime experience, some of which appear to have no relationship to science at all. Like you look up to the stars, you saw a shooting star, you went, wow, I think I can know about that. And that shaped your entire understanding that you can know what's out there. And what do we call this? We call this, of course, our worldview.
Yeah.
Our worldviews influence our theory choice. And so we've seen that in our last book, how we approach supposed issues within the Bible, and we say that we have a worldview in which God's word is perfect, and so we come at it with not a defeatist attitude of saying, oh, the Bible contains contradictions, so anything that arises doesn't have an explanation that can be balanced and or found to have a better explanation. Or we approach it from another way and say all the entire universe is only known through naturalistic means, and so if you have the splitting of the Red Sea, well, okay, I might observe it, but clearly that's not a miracle because my worldview impacts what my observations are and what my explanation to that observation is.
Could possibly be, right?
Possibly.
My worldview kind of puts boundaries around what the possible explanations, the possible theories that I could come up with for any observation that I have, right? That's the basic idea. He talks about a particular famous example of how worldviews influence theory choice with regard to Einstein's resistance to quantum theory, which is with its indeterminacy and other weirdness, right? So we won't get into all of that. But he says, for example, not only is there a built-in uncertainty in quantum mechanics, but this uncertainty about when a radioactive particle will decay is a result of there being no definite time when the particle will decay. So radioactive particles decay, but we don't know when because there is no definite time,
right.
At least to our knowledge.
That's why we talk about half-lives.
That's right, right. There's nothing physical about the particle that dictates that it will decay at a particular time rather than another. So this same exact physical state can produce two entirely different results, right? And there is no way to predict which one will happen. But Einstein believed that the world simply isn't like this, right? He wanted to come up with a way to say, wait a minute, let's come up with a mathematical formula that will allow us to predict which one of these, because he said God doesn't play dice, right? And so there must be a way to figure this out. Of course, he was never able to find one, and even though he spent his life doing it. Einstein, so Einstein's worldview got in the way of his acceptance of quantum theory. Right? He said it can't work this way because there's got to be a way to figure out what's going on here. Right?
So we get accused of God of the gaps. His is relativity of the gaps.
That's right. Yeah. Einstein also disagreed with some of the founders of quantum theory about what a scientific theory should do. Right. So before we can answer how do we know what's best, we need to know what should a theory be doing for us. What is the purpose of a theory? Now we already said that what it accomplishes is an explanation. But what does that exactly mean? What should a theory do, right? Notice, when confronting with the counterintuitive world that quantum theory seems to depict, Niels Bohr, for example, said that a good scientific theory need not tell us the truth about the unobservable world. It merely need be a useful tool or a useful instrument for predicting the things that we can observe. Yeah. So for Bohr's, we would call Bohr's position instrumentalism or scientific anti-realism or scientific non-realism. He says the work that a theory does for us, what a theory should do, is just allow us to make predictions. It's a useful tool. It's a tool that we can use, right? So that's one way of explaining what a theory should do, right? It need not tell us the truth about the unobservable world. It merely needs to be a useful tool or an instrument for predicting things that we can observe, right? Okay, well, that sounds fine, right? We want a theory that allows us to predict, that's useful, that allows us to work with the things that we're working with and make predictions and that sort of thing, right? But what else? Well, the alternative view is known as scientific realism, right? According to this view, the entities, properties, events posited by scientific theories really do exist and they really do occur. But Einstein disagreed with Bohr's instrumentalism, believing that the goal of science is to get at the truth about reality, not merely develop tools to manipulate the observable world. So on one side, we have the instrumentalist that says, look, we don't care about whether or not it's true. That's not what we're looking at. Is it useful? Is it a good instrument, right? Does it allow us to predict and manipulate the world and all those type of things? On the other side, we say, no. What a theory should do for us is to get us at the truth, to tell us the way the real world actually is. So that's a debate between instrumentalism and realism with regard to what a theory should do. All right?
So if you go back to relativity, relativity might not be true, but it gets you the atom bomb, and that's really helpful for the war effort.
Yeah.
So we don't care that it's wrong, but
or at least not true, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Not true.
Yeah.
But it gets us something powerful, and we can refine the theory later. We can go back. We're not married to this theory, and we'll come up with something else, and we'll still have the atom bomb. So that's all right.
Yeah, right. So he says, suppose you and I are arguing over whether Newtonian physics or general relativity is a better account of the nature of space. This argument will be difficult to sort out because each theory assumes up front an entirely, notice, different concept of space. Each theory comes with its own, we might say, worldview, right?
Yeah.
So, of course, I'll think that Newtonian physics makes more sense of the concept that Newtonian physics assumes. Space is like this. I'm assuming space is like this. And look, Newtonian physics explains it. Yes, it wins, right? Yeah. The nature of space is itself colored, the point he's making here, by the theory. And this is often the case generally. We must stand, he says, on theories to argue for them. There's sometimes nowhere else to stand. Beliefs about the theories are themselves soaked in theories, sometimes the very same ones, right? So, these theories then, we posit a theory. The theory is based on our worldview. We believe the world is like this, and so this is the way we explain it. If we believe the world was different, not a Newtonian type of world, but a quantum physics type of world, we come up with different theories about about our observations, right? And so, to a certain extent, our worldview about what we're looking at, the way the world is, influences clearly the theories that we come up with.
Yeah.
In fact, we'll see here, even influences our observations.
Yeah, in many ways.
Yeah.
So if you go back to the atom bomb, if you have a belief that God won't allow you to destroy the earth because he's got that all wrapped up in his plan, and so you are hesitant about blowing up the atmosphere of the earth, but you have a worldview that says, well, God's in control and certain things have to come to pass in order for the earth to be destroyed. So we can let off as many nuclear bombs as possible, and hopefully that doesn't fit perfectly into God's plan.
Right. Or we could have another theory about what God is doing and saying, God is going to use this to end the world, and therefore we should do it, right? And it's going to end the world, right? So, yeah. So beliefs, the point he's trying to make here is that the beliefs we have strongly influence the beliefs that we form. The beliefs we have strongly influence the beliefs that we form. Yeah. Now, again, if we're realists, we're going to say, yeah, but there is a real way the world is, and that's what we want the truth about the way the world really is, and therefore, we will have to figure out a way to get around these things. But we need to understand, and what makes science hard is that even when we're positing theories about our observations, we are influenced by our worldview in terms of the what the world is like.
Right.
And so we need to understand that. Oftentimes the debate between whether or not, I don't know, evolution and creation, that sort of thing, is not about observations. It's not about the facts of the matter. It's about how the world is being perceived.
Right. Yeah. So when we think about this, the worldview, we have those beliefs, and then it informs kind of our expectations. It's where we look, and so this moves us. We're not some tabula rasa, blank slate where you approach an observation. Again, this Photoshop view of science. I approach this observation. I see this planet move, and then I postulate another planet because of a wobble in this. No, there are underlying assumptions. If today, if we posited planet X, Y, and Z, but we've never seen those types of influences where these big planets would have on gravitational pull and fields and objects in space that you shouldn't see with these other planets. Well, then you might not postulate other planets because that that type of experimentation has already been done, and you haven't seen those variations back then. You're not looking for planets because your worldview of how to identify new planets out there
doesn't allow for it.
It doesn't allow for it.
Yeah, good.
So again, it's not this Photoshop view of science. It's this human approach, and one of the things about humans is we all come with certain assumptions. That's our worldview in how we get things. If your worldview doesn't allow for miracles, then the sun staying in the sky for another day could not happen, and so another explanation must be the result.
Right.
People were mistaken. Everyone on Earth fell asleep and woke up, and it was just another day.
Right.
Whatever it might be, you cannot accept that a miracle occurs because your worldview does not allow for a supernatural
intervention into what's going on.
Yeah.
And so so then, given this importance of worldviews with regard to and its effect on our beliefs, now what he moves to is he's going to say that scientists now have a certain worldview, right? And it comes from as a result of their education. So his next topic here is the education. The education of a scientist, right? It often goes unnoticed, or at least unmentioned, that scientists undergo a particular intense kind of indoctrination, right? This training is extremely formative and very effective, preparing students for membership in a unique culture. That's a worldview, right? That's the basic idea. Ever after, scientists tend to look at the world differently through a different set of lenses, right? And so there's this worldview that they are taught. They're indoctrinated, we might say, which is kind of a tough word, but we'll say it like that because that's what he uses here. And so he gives us some examples of this. For instance, textbooks, right? The context of textbooks is important, but what's just as important is the way textbooks present the material. They depict science as a relatively neat and hygienic accumulation of knowledge with very little discussion of the historical messiness, its dead ends, misfires, and failures. Right?
And we've seen this in, at least it's 2019 now. For you, it might not be 2019. There's relativity for you. But we've had discussions within local school communities about what should a textbook teach about evolution. Should it teach the controversy? Should it teach creationism alongside? Should they be given equal weight? Should they even discuss creationism at all as a possible secondary theory? Or is it so far outside the realm of possibility of science that it's not even worth consideration? Evolution is the only way, and the Earth is the center of the universe.
Right. And so the point he's making here, clearly is, he says it's a Herculean task to simply take the main features of the scientific theory. And so there's little time and energy to ask, the big questions and for looking at the history and philosophy of science and mathematics. So you almost have to get into, a different discipline in order to get those types. Because just getting the basics is tough enough, right? And so they smooth it out, make it photoshopped so that you can get the basics down. But again, textbooks now are a way that to view science, right?
Yeah.
And it allows for the development of a scientific view or a worldview that is given to scientists, the students who are studying science.
In reading this, I was also thinking about look at various forms of medicine. You have the Western medicine and the Eastern medicine. The Western medicine is going to teach you pills, surgery, different humors of the body, essentially. Blood is important, everything like that. But Eastern medicine is going to talk about a spiritual aspect. It's going to talk about chakras. It's going to talk about acupuncture. It's going to talk about different, if you have back pain, it might not be a spinal thing. We should first look at how your alignment is, or if you have a muscle out of place. And so acupuncture, massage therapy is the best one, or crystals, or that might be a extreme one. But the way that those schools of medicine occur, I'm not trying to argue the pros or the cons of chiropractic, but some people say doctor, other people say not doctor. Right, so it's about again. So that textbook, those initial formations is important, and also within textbooks, you're kind of being given. Again, the snapshot. You're given the picture, not the movie.
Right.
And so you don't have to go around proving 1 + 1 = 2, 1 + 2 is 3. How does that work? Why does that work? You don't have to redevelop calculus. Newton's already done that for you, and so you're coming upon it, and so you're not having to do all this work that your ancestors have done over the past generations to get you to this point. Right. And so, is it important? Well, it almost seems like it's ingrained in us that it's not that important, because it's already been done. It's already been proven. The science is settled. And so go on about your business.
Move on.
And now you have to prove higher levels of math for math's sake.
So it's
important.
Right. So indoctrination with regard to textbooks. Secondly, indoctrination with regards to, notice he says, scientific education also teaches students what kinds of authorities to trust.
Well, I thought we weren't supposed to listen to authorities. Kant told us that authorities should be thrown out the window.
Right. So this is crucial, because most of what we know, even what scientists know, is based on, notice, testimonies, right? From what other people tell us, right? For instance, my name is Tony. How do I know that? Well, an authority told me that, right?
Your birth
testimony, these people told me that this piece of paper is my birth certificate, and it's telling me that this is what my name is. So it's based on their authority, right? Virtually many of our beliefs are based on the authority of what other people have to say.
Parents that also taught you about fairies stealing your teeth when you get lost.
That's right.
Are you going to trust those people? That's madness.
That some guy puts presents under a evergreen tree, right?
Yeah, inside, nonetheless.
Individual scientists make only a tiny fraction of the possible calculations, observation, and theory choice that are part of his or her neural subdiscipline. This was the point you were trying to make, right? We use the authorities, right? Sanctioned sources for the additional information include course lectures, journals, books, conferences, and even the most casual discussion with advisors and directors. All of these hone the student's ability to identify community-accepted sources of knowledge.
Right. Well, and that's what you think, because there have been, again, sorry to pick on the social sciences, but I'm sure it's happened in the natural sciences too, is they come out with these weird, bizarre studies, and they realize later on, well, we just made those up, or we just took Hitler's Mein Kampf and changed a few words so that we instilled, lesbian, feminist, Marxist theory within it, and it got passed through the same thing. And here are people citing our work. So there's the assumption that, whatever scientific process, whether it's scientific or not is probably up for debate, but whatever this process that at least science that has taught you, this is how you do science, or this is how you progress in science, these are the journals to look for. These are the ones in your field. These are the ones that can be trusted. When those fail, what does that do to your worldview? Does that upset it at all? You go, oh no, it's just, a few jokesters
It's
coming
an
up
anomaly.
with it. Yeah. So red in the face. We're embarrassed, but we're definitely still
we're not
right.
going to overthrow that.
Yeah. Oh no.
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 So notice his point is, in any case, scientists have a special kind of deeply ingrained worldview, one that tells them which kinds of rationality are valuable, which kinds of theories count as successful, and so on. Scientists get a feel for which kinds of hypotheses are even worth considering.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so applying this to our discussion of the theory choice, to choose the best explanation is just to choose, notice, our favorite explanation. That's right. What it is. And favorites are always determined by our values. Mm-hmm. Right? And so he's going to talk more about values in the second part when he talks about morality. But so there it is. How do we determine? Well, one way is, we look at the various theory, the explanation in terms of our worldview. Our worldviews have been shaped, at least scientists, by these various ways, textbooks and authorities and that sort of thing. And so it's the best explanation is our favorite explanation based on what we value. Those come from our worldview, and so we're really kind of caught in this, and everybody does this, right? It's neither bad or good, but we need to recognize it, be informed by it, and understand that consider ways to maybe help us to overcome these types of biases.
Because real science is hard; it's not Photoshop.
Right.
The moon, whether you really like cheese, is maybe not made of cheese once we go there. And so you have to do something with that theory. That might have been your favorite explanation. And again, because you're human, because scientists are human, you might get theories that come up like that. And so you have to be able to do away with your foundational beliefs or desires, I guess. Your favorite explanation might just be, oh, that was fun for a while.
Good. So next, why is science hard? Science is hard because of the theory-ladenness of observations. We kind of hit on this before, right? Surprisingly, he says our scientific theories strongly influence what we observe, not just what we believe.
Some people would view this statement as a hard stretch. No. I look up in the sky, I see the moon. It's there, right? That's it. So. I sure, whether or not it's made of cheese is one thing, but it's there.
So here's the other thing. You look up in the moon, or you look up in the sky, the sun is here at one time and the sun is there at another time. What does that tell us? Does it tell us that the sun moved? Yes, at one time it did, right? Or does it tell us that the earth is moving? Well, now that, right? So notice, our scientific theories strongly influence what we observe. Did we observe the sun moving, or do we observe the earth spinning? Mm-hmm. Well, it depends on our theory.
Right. Location. Yeah.
Right? So for one thing, our current theories, our current beliefs about what the world is like are largely influenced by what scientific theory we hold. So this determines what sorts of features we wish to test, right? And the kinds of experiments we use to test them. Our theories also tell us which sorts of observations are acceptable, right? Which experiments count as reliable or successful. So again, our theories are laden by our observations, right? And so what's the issue here? Well, this is the point he's trying to make. Background knowledge, for instance, tells us what a particular observation means, right? And even what counts as evidence for or against a theory. Mm-hmm. Well, our background knowledge is another way, perhaps, of saying in a brief way, our worldview, right? Our knowledge that we have, that we bring into the picture, that we bring into the explanation, right?
Yeah, there was a scientist, and I listened to a podcast with him, Avi Loeb from I believe Harvard. He postulated that there was this. They observed a comet, and they said his postulation was it was possible if you were an alien civilization, this might be one of the ways you would send out kind of beacons in order to attract attention. And so he became news famous because anytime you talk about aliens in the news, especially a scientist from Harvard, you kind of get those headlines. But there's so many people in his field that don't view that because, well, the fact that evolution even existed on Earth is astronomical. The fact that it could happen out there again is also astronomical. So in their worldview, aliens aren't possible, but in he's allowing for a reality in which aliens exist and that they're willing to communicate and wanting to, and this might be a way that they do it. So they both have the same observation, so it's their worldview that allows for that type of evidence, either for or against it. Mm-hmm. He views it in the way that it's shaped, or what he would consider as communicable information as potential evidence, but other people just view it as a normal comment. So again, it's what your worldview allows you to observe, and then also what counts against it. Well, for everybody else that doesn't agree with him, all the evidence counts against it because their worldview doesn't allow for alien.
And so his point here, Stokes' point, is that theory influences observation. Which influences theory? Which influences observation, right? He says we have what he calls a kind of scientific hermeneutical circle for something as apparently objective as seeing, right? Seeing is believing, but the converse is true as well, right? And again, what we see is the sun here at one time and the sun over there at another. What are we observing? Well, it depends on the theory that we have. Mm-hmm. Are we observing the sun rotating, moving around the earth, or are we observing the earth spinning? Well, what's our theory? Mm-hmm. What's our worldview? And then that'll tell us then what we're observing to a certain extent, right? And so we need to be aware of that, right? We might have to split this book up again.
Man, I don't know.
This chapter up again.
I think so.
So it's getting late here with regard to our discussion.
Yeah.
So how about we just end this here, and then we take up the rest of this chapter next time, because I think these are important issues, and we need these to help him to make his case here.
Right. I mean, theory is a large part of what science does, and the fact that this is a large number of points that he makes in a greater number of pages, I think we need to cover well, and there's a little bit more to it. So yeah, I agree.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for being with us this time, where, as we have said, now we're going over Mitch Stokes' book, How to Be an Atheist. We're working our way through this turns out to be a hard chapter, right? Even though it's not very long, it's only about 8 pages or so. Right?
We've got the coal miner's dust on us.
Yeah.
And,
it's real science is hard. This is chapter 6. We're working our way through this, and we'll pick this up next time.
So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.